I forgot to raise my camera. Hey, everybody. This is Elaine Belson again. Welcome to Ask Me Anything, where I answer your questions live. This is related to mental health. I am a psychotherapist. So let me just start by saying that um, just a few reminders. This feed is live, but it's also being recorded. Advice given on this show is for informational purposes only and is not intended to replace professional psychological or medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Questions and concerns about your mental health should be discussed with a qualified professional. Any use of this information is the sole responsibility of the listener. If you have thoughts of harming yourself or someone else, call 988 or go to the nearest emergency room. If you are watching this recorded, then please feel free to enter some questions in the comment section under the video, and I will answer them if I don't get any live questions. So the first question that I got was, how do I deal with passive aggressive people? I don't know how to deal with them, and although I'm offended by their comments or actions, I ignore it and feel I have lost all my power. And this question came from Claire, and I replied with some wanting some more information. And so she says, someone who uses sarcasm and indirect communication in a negative manner with no consideration for the feelings of others. Okay. So first of all, let's talk about some examples. So she brings up sarcasm. Other examples are the silent treatment, backhanded compliments like, well, that presentation was certainly more interesting than the last one. Non-verbal cues like eye rolling and walking away. So why do people engage in passive aggressive behavior? The reason is because they have two feelings. They have mixed feelings. And that part is normal. We all have mixed feelings most of the time about most things. But the difference is that is how we cope with them, right? Why would somebody be passive aggressive to begin with? Well, it's a defense mechanism. That's why. And with all defense mechanisms, the goal is not to hurt you. The goal is to protect themselves. And in the process, it often is hurtful to other people. Some examples might be, let's say husband comes home from work and plays video games. The wife might say, must be nice to play video games for hours, as opposed to, doing chores around the house. Another example might be at work, like, gee, must be nice to have time to go out for lunch, because that person works during their lunch break. So what would make somebody engage in this kind of coping mechanism? Well, there can be a number of reasons. One of them is because that person is dismissing or minimizing the unspoken feeling. And I have a great example for this. I had a couple that the husband called the wife out of the blue from work and said, I don't want to be married anymore. I want a divorce. And it was just, so they came to counseling, fortunately. And what came out of it was that the husband was telling himself that the things that were bothering him were not that important. He was overreacting, right? And so therefore he never stood up for himself or articulated them. And so the wife didn't know that there were some things that were bothering him until, he came to the point where he just thought that, I have no choice. I'm just going to have to get a divorce. So they were able to work through that. So dismissing and minimizing feelings can be one reason why somebody might than passively express those feelings. Another example is to avoid uncomfortable feelings. There may be certain feelings that we don't articulate because they're too uncomfortable for us to even acknowledge. That could be something like hurt or anxiety, for example. A third reason could be fear of rejection. They're afraid that if they do actually say what's on their mind, that the person won't be happy with them and in some way might uh, reject them. Right. So, and then another reason why someone might engage in passive aggressive behavior is learned helplessness. So they may have expressed themselves in the past and maybe like during their upbringing, but every time they did, they never got their needs met. So they just learned that there's no point in expressing myself because the person's not going to listen anyway. So, how do we change this? So, the first thing is that remember, this is a coping mechanism, right? It's not personal. Now, having said that, even though you may understand that the intent is not to hurt you, it's still hurtful and you have a right to feel the way that you do. So we don't want to ignore your feelings, but we also want to respond to the passive aggressive behavior in a way that is constructive, right? That's not going to lead to an argument or a power struggle, or that person doubling down on whatever it is that they said. So the thing to do is to ignore what I call the content. That is, what's being said or done, and focus on the underlying feeling. What is motivating that person to say what it is that they're saying or doing what they're doing, right? What is motivating that passive aggressive behavior? And um, the reason why this is important, there's a couple of reasons why this is important. But first and foremost is because when we focus on emotion, that's an area where we can connect with other people because everybody, all human beings experience basically the same emotions. So that way, what you're doing is you are um, finding some common ground, something that where you can relate to one another. And it's also really getting at what is the underlying issue rather than focusing on that particular uh, scenario. I call it same scene different script. So the reason for the passive aggressive behavior may change, but the underlying dynamic as to why they're doing it is the same. And so if you just focus on content, then you're getting sucked into the script and not the underlying scene that is what's really going on between you and that person. So so first of all, what you can do is you want to acknowledge that unspoken feeling. So if somebody's being sarcastic, you know that there's a feeling there that's not being expressed behind the sarcasm. It could be hurt, it could be anxiety, it could be frustration. And so what you want to do is you want to comment on it. So, depending on the relationship, you could say something along the lines of, you sound hurt, you sound angry, you sound annoyed, and just leave it at that and give that person a chance to respond. If it's a more formal situation like work or somebody you don't know very well, you might say, well, sounds like you don't agree with me, would be an example. Um, or sounds like you have a different perspective than I do about this. So the second way of focusing on the emotion is to do what we call I messaging. And you may have heard about this before, particularly if you've ever done any kind of counseling, and particularly if you've done couples counseling, because it's a good skill for learning how to communicate with people constructively. And so, what you want to do is you want to focus on something concrete, something observable, not characterize the person's behavior, like saying, well, when you were sarcastic, or when you made that sarcastic remark, because that person may not agree with you that they were sarcastic. So, what you want to do is you want to focus on what was actually said or what the person actually did. And so that is the X. And then the next thing that you want to do is you want to use a feeling word, and that is the Y. And again, the reason why we focus on feelings is because it's less threatening. It's something that everyone can relate to. And then the third part of an I message, I have altered to say, but I don't want to make any assumptions, so I'm checking in with you first. So this is the way the whole statement would be. When you said X, I felt Y, but I don't want to make any assumptions, so I'm checking in with you. And then you can adjust it according to the situation. Did you mean to come across that way, or is that how you really feel? So depending on the situation, you might change that last question. But what you're doing is you're giving that person an opportunity to explain themselves, because they're going to anyway. And then when they do, it's going to sound defensive. It's going to sound like they're ignoring your feelings. And so it's best just to uh, get that out of the way and give them an opportunity to explain themselves anyway. So so an example would be, when you rolled your eyes, I felt dismissed, or I felt like my opinion didn't matter, but I don't want to make any assumptions. Was that your intent, or is that how you really feel or think? So that's an example of an I message. Now, beyond that, beyond focusing on the emotion, another thing that I find is really helpful is a mantra that I use, which is treat people the way you want them to behave, right? So it's a little sort of a variation on, the golden rule: treat people the way you want to be treated. This is treat people the way you want them to behave. And the reason why is because oftentimes people, whatever reason they have for behaving the way that they behave, has nothing to do with you, but they may either consciously or unconsciously expect you to behave a certain way. So when you don't behave that way, when you treat them the way that you want them to behave, what you're doing is you're usually treating them in a positive way. You're overlooking the negativity, the sarcasm, the anger, whatever it is, and they're not expecting that. They're expecting for people to respond to them the way that they anticipate, and that's where that coping mechanism comes from to begin with. They have a certain expectation of the way people are going to treat them, and it's a defense mechanism. So you're surprising them in that way, pleasantly surprising them. Secondly, what I find is that people will rise to the occasion when you treat them the way you want them to behave. So a little example was last year when I went to see this tax attorney for the first time. When I arrived, she was very unfriendly, almost, hostile. And so I just made a conscious decision to say, she's probably overwhelmed. It's tax season. She's probably been helping a lot of clients. And so I'm just going to pretend that she's not acting the way that she is, right? I'm going to just ignore it or overlook it. And so I smiled and I asked her, "How are you doing?" Probably commented on, "Wow, you must be really tired. This must be a really difficult time of year," et cetera, et cetera. And just basically pretended that she was behaving differently than she actually was. Right. And what I found that was in no time, her demeanor changed and she started becoming really friendly and smiling. And in fact, so much so that I selected to work with her again this year. And when I saw her for the first time, she was very smiley and friendly. And I don't know if that was because she remembered me from the previous year or maybe she was just in a better headspace, but whatever it was, she did change. And I think it was because I didn't react to the way that she was coming across. So that's that question. So I will stop there. Those are some really great questions. And I thank Claire and I thank Mama Foxfire for submitting them. And you can do the same thing. Um, Now that you've watched this episode, you can enter your questions in the comment area. I would also love your feedback. So if you found this helpful, like and share this episode. Um, Also, if you want to be notified of future episodes, I am going to be doing Ask Me Anything live every Fridays at 12 noon. So if you want to be notified so that you can ask a question live and listen to other people's questions live, then go ahead and click on the little bell and you will be notified when it's time, when it's Friday at noon to join in. And if you want more content, then you can go to ElaineBelson.com. I have a website there where I have more articles on, or psychoeducational articles like on anxiety and on self-esteem. And I have a bunch of other podcasts that you can listen to. So again, that's ElaineBelson.com. And I look forward to seeing you next Friday at 12 noon. Have a great weekend.